So when you're thinking of the buying versus renting thing, is what percentage of your equation is on math and numbers, and what percentage is on emotion and happiness?
Great question. In the beginning, almost all on numbers. So when I was renting in San Francisco, it was a steal. Basically, the amount that I would have paid to own it was close to 2 times more for an equivalent place. Then I moved to New York, and I had a place in New York, a pretty nice place. And I would always keep my eye on the real estate market just for kicks. And I was tracking stuff. And of course, every year I would negotiate my rent. And in an 11-year period, my rent went down 4 times. This is in Manhattan. So a lot of people think like rent only goes up. No, it doesn't. Depending on where you live, even depending on the segment you're in, rent can go down. At that point in New York, when I ran the numbers for an equivalent place that was just 2 buildings over, same view, same square footage, same everything, it would have cost 2.2 times more to own than to rent. So let me break down the math, because I was mathematically oriented. Let's pretend that I was paying $5,000 a month, okay? If I was paying $5,000 a month to rent, then to own that place, when I factor in taxes, maintenance, opportunity cost of the down payment, transaction costs, all of it.
Let me ask you about those numbers. So for opportunity cost, do you assume 7.5%?
7%.
Okay, so you assume 7%. And then for maintenance, what do you assume? 2% of the property value a year?
In New York, yes. In other places, I would go lower, but New York is just inherently more expensive.
Okay. And then and then in some buildings or apartment versus other stuff, you'd have HOA. New York,
correct, like thousands per month.
Very expensive.
Thousands.
Yeah, I have friends who have an HOA that's $5,000 a month. Very expensive.
Yeah, that's totally normal in a high-end building in New York. Yeah, completely normal.
All right, so you have opportunity cost, you have maintenance, you have HOA. What else do you factor in there?
Transaction costs. When you buy and sell, it's a massive.
What's it like?
Realtor fees.
4%?
I forget the calculation I used back then, but it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars for a unit of that when you count both ends. Okay. And then furniture. This is something not to be missed. You don't get the same furniture in a rental as you get in a place you bought for a lot of money. You get nicer furniture. You need to factor that in. You need to be honest. Also, renovations. People are not really renovating their rentals, but they're renovating their other ones. So I factored it all in. Okay. And again, you can play with the assumptions. In New York, I always prefer to estimate high.
What do you use for the future growth? Do you use 3.5% annual growth?
I used 3% for rental growth, and I used, I think, a 3.5 or in the ballpark of that for owning. Again, we need to factor in appreciation because there are a lot of buildings in high cost of living cities. They lose money every year, but they make it on appreciation. Okay. So I factored it all in. I was like, wait a second. If I'm paying $5,000 over here, sample number, it would cost me $11,000 per month to own the same basic unit with the same view, etc. I go, I'm good. I'll take the $6,000 per month. I'll invest it. And that's exactly what I did. And I've been doing that for like close to 20 years. So that turns into a lot of money over time. And you get to live in amazing places. Now, that's the math part. But at a certain point, when my wife and I decide to buy, which one day we probably will.
Do you have a time frame or like not a time?
No.
Do you think that maybe in the next 5 years you might, or is it just whenever you?
Probably not in the next 5, but probably like after that. That's my guess. But when we go to make that decision, my goal with anything really important in my life is that I don't want cost to be the number one consideration. I don't want it to be number 2 or even number 3. I want to have enough money that I can go and be like, that's what I want. It's totally irrational, but it's exactly what I want. And I don't really care what it costs.
Is your mentality, okay, so money is number 3 or number 4. I think you said 4 or 5 on that list. So is your mentality going into buying a home, do you think it's going to be like, I would like to not lose money on this, or if possible, I want this to be a store of value or something like that?
No. I will lose a huge amount of money. It will be the worst financial decision I ever make. It will cost me millions. It will cost us millions. I know that. It's okay.
Well, but you said money's number 4. So if it's number 4,
no. I don't want it to be number one, number two, number three. It's going to be like a distant number. Like, give me an example. My wedding. When my wife and I got married, I'd been saving for like over a decade, well before I knew her. Because I knew, I'm Indian, I want to have an amazing wedding, and I don't want cost to be relevant at all.
You should have brought that up on your first date. Like, hey, I've been saving for our wedding, by the way.
That's not weird. That's not weird at all. That's what people often in the personal finance community want you to do. They're like, pull out your Roth IRA, show them your allocation. I'm like, can you guys go on a first date for once in your life, please?
Like during dessert, you're like, what's your credit score? And by the way, can we go over our budget for our wedding?
So that was an example where I knew that something inevitable was going to happen. One day I was going to get married. I wanted to be married one day. And I was like, this is going to be awesome. And I don't want cost to be relevant at all. Okay, within reason, but like I was happy to pay a lot. Same for a house. It's a luxury purchase. It's not an investment. It's a horrible investment in a high cost of living area. So I'm just approaching it as a pure luxury, as if I was going and buying a beautiful sweater or car or whatever. I don't care. I'm going to lose money. It's pure desire.
You said that you want to be able to buy cash. Will you get a mortgage, or does that depend on the rates?
Maybe. So I have 10 money rules. They're online. And one of the rules is be able to pay in cash for any large purchases, such as wedding, honeymoon, car, house. Now, people are always like, what the hell are you talking about? Pay for a house in cash. And the origin of this is I had a mentor when I was an intern, much younger. And he told me, he said, Ramit, we have a no debt policy in our house. No debt. I said, wow. In my head, I'm thinking, must be nice. The guy lived in a very elite Bay Area city. As I got older and my business grew, I started to realize that actually takes discipline to have a no debt policy in your house. Now, we can quibble about whether debt is good or bad, and sometimes it's leveraged and whatever. But just the idea that he had a philosophy, a point of view on debt, I really love that. And so one day when we buy a house, I want to make sure we have enough somewhere in our net worth that if we wanted to, we would pay with cash. Will we do it? If it's a 1.5% mortgage, no, we'll take that mortgage all day. But I'm not going to buy a house that we don't already have the available cash for, purely as a matter of discipline.
And I want to ask you about like your future home, like what you want to what the attributes will be. But when you are does it factor in how often you're going to move? So for my rules for buying a home, one of the rules I have is I want to live there for 25 years.
Dude, you and I agree on so much. Basically, all of our podcasts are two bros agreeing with each other. Like, that's it. I love it. Okay, I totally agree. When we go to buy a house, the general suggestion I give to people is you better plan to live there for at least 10 years. I think the same way, long term. Let me explain the math behind it, because this is quite counterintuitive as well. So we've all heard the phrase, you're throwing money away on rent. I go, how come you don't say the same thing when you go eat at sushi on Saturdays? You're throwing money away on sushi. Or how come you don't say you're paying your sushi owner's mortgage? How come we only use that real ridiculous sneer for a landlord? I don't care if a landlord makes money, as long as I'm making money. Everybody can make money. It's great. In the case of buying a house and staying there and then moving in a few years, it's usually a really big financial mistake. Let me tell you why.